Hello there, general audience. It's me, Cody McNews, with the news. ICE and the entire deportation and detainment apparatus. That's the news, and dare I say, there's gonna be a lot of it. We already know that they are terrible, unpopular, evil, can't dance, etc. But there's one aspect about the way they function that should be discussed more often, and that is the constant, relentless, bald-faced lies. I know that sounds quaint these days, what with the entire Trump administration just sort of existing. But there's actually something way scarier about the consequence to the lies that ICE and Homeland Security tell. It's one of those destroying the fabric of society situations, a demonstrable impact on basic Magna Carta-ass institutions such as a system of laws and justice. And so myself and the rest of the McNews family wanted to talk about and debunk and detail these lies. Untruths that, in the grand scheme of history, might be far more consequential than any other lie happening right now. Yes, even that one you're thinking of. The one you tell yourself every morning to get through the day. Sorry if that got too real, but there's just not gonna be a new Blade movie anytime soon. You have to face that fact eventually. ICE lies. I mean, maybe they'll pull through with a script, maybe. It's been years. Okay, so these lies are gonna come in two basic categories: Marvel movies and ICE stuff. We've gone through all the Marvel crap, so on to ICE, and that is also in two categories. Those told to the public or to judges to enable or justify deportations, and the lies told to immigrants to lure them into traps. Both types are equally dangerous, not only for immigrants, but for citizens as well. And we're gonna start with the former, and specifically with one of the more notable cases. That's the Kilmar Abrego Garcia story, which is ongoing as of filming this episode. That case has become something of a litmus test for what the Trump administration can get away with, both in the bullshit they spew and the illegal actions they take. For context, Kilmar Abrego came to the US in 2011 when he was 16, seeking asylum from a gang in El Salvador that was extorting and threatening him and his family. In 2019, he was arrested outside a Home Depot because he was looking for work and ultimately detained for 7 months. He was accused of being an MS-13 based on the fact that he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat. An officer claimed he received a confidential tip that Abrego was part of the Western's MS-13 gang in New York, even though Abrego never lived in that state. That police officer later was suspended for giving confidential information to a sex worker. So here comes the first lie.
This is a MS-13 gang member, a tough cookie, been in lots of skirmishes, beat the hell out of his wife, and the wife was petrified to even talk about him, okay?
So addressing that first part, despite what Trump keeps saying, Abrego was not found to be a gang member. One judge did mention the informant had claimed Abrego was a gang member, the one the suspended officer had cited, but Abrego was not charged with any crimes, nor in any way proven or verified to be in any gang. Claims by informants, you see, have to actually be proven for them to hold up in court. Well, that's the idea, at least. A judge that same year, while not granting him asylum, gave him protected status against being deported due to the risk of being targeted by gang violence back in El Salvador. The court specifically barred any deportation of Abrego to El Salvador. Abrego checked in with ICE every year, and the Department of Homeland Security allowed him a work permit. As for that second part of Trump's claim, after his 7-month detention, his wife said he went through a behavioral change, becoming physically and verbally abusive. She filed a protective order against him twice, then rescinded the protective orders. She says that they sought counseling and that they had closed that chapter. No charges were ever filed against Abrego. And to be clear, we're not trying to do PR for this guy. Her allegations against him were extremely severe and disturbing. But this is a good opportunity to note something for the rest of the video. Someone can do something morally wrong, be an asshole, be a bad person, prefer mug over Barq's root beer, and is still entitled to their legal rights. That's kind of the entire point of having rights rather than privileges. There has to be a system in which someone's wrongdoings are adjudicated rather than punished based on bad vibes. I mean, doesn't the right hate cancel culture? I'm not defending domestic violence here, but rather pointing out that if we started sending everyone with alleged domestic violence to an El Salvadoran prison, we'd also be including President Donald Trump, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Republican Congressman Corey Mills, and Speaker at Trump's inauguration, UFC President Dana White, to name a few. I'm willing to make that sacrifice, but are Republicans. Not to mention that if ICE or Trump actually cared about domestic violence, they'd probably be concerned about 40% of cops in America. But regarding this specific topic, if they actually cared about domestic violence, they wouldn't have removed their policy of sensitive zones, which now allow ICE to enter women's shelters for domestic violence. This is a pattern where they talk about immigrants harming others like kids and women, and then harm those exact same people in their quest to deport immigrants, because they don't actually care. So back to the Abrego case. In March of this year, he was pulled over with his young special needs baby in the car, then arrested, then put on a plane and sent to El Salvador's notoriously inhumane CCOT prison, despite the court order explicitly blocking him from being deported to, specifically, El Salvador. And when I say arrested, I'm being generous. Kidnapped, maybe, because no one seems to know why he was pulled over in the first place. And so here's where the lies become more frantic, stupid, and cruel. First, Trump administration immigration officials admitted that Abrego was sent to El Salvador due to an administrative error. So let's just be aware of that through this entire explanation. A DOJ lawyer admitted that they made a mistake by sending him there. Oh, and then they fired that lawyer, of course. Then, of course, border czar, fake job, Tom Homan, claimed that in fact this wasn't a mistake, just a mere oversight, but also, coincidentally, totally the right thing to do. Quote, "There was an oversight, there was a withholding order, but the facts surrounding the withholding order had changed. He is now a terrorist, and the gang he was fearing from being removed from El Salvador no longer exists." This is yet another lie, a bushel of lies, what we in the biz call bullshit. What's the evidence that Abrego is now a terrorist? Well, the Chicago Bulls hat he wore back in 2019, and the informant who claimed he was a member of MS-13 in the state he never lived in. Oh, that's all it takes. I'm so sorry, Chicago Bulls fans. I mean, even more sorry. Also, the gang that Abrego fled in 2011, Barrio 18, does in fact still exist, particularly inside of CCOT, where thousands of members are being held. You know, the prison that Abrego was sent to, along with a huge number of innocent people due to El Salvador's shady legal system. So contrary to Tom Homan's lie, the facts surrounding the withholding order had not changed. The withholding order came after the unproven accusation that Abrego was a gang member, and no new evidence had surfaced. Lie. His weird statement that he is now a terrorist refers to the fact that the Trump administration changed the MS-13 designation to a terrorist organization, not to any actual evidence against Abrego. So that's what passes for due process now. The Trump administration, after admitting that they mistakenly deported you to a place they specifically were told not to, can say some group is a terrorist organization, can claim you're part of that group with no proof, and bada bing, you're a terrorist now, buddy. Congratulations. You get a free subscription to Terrorist Weekly and also Sling TV for some reason. Of course, when people started pointing out there's no actual credible evidence of Abrego being in MS-13, President Detective Photo Printout pulls out an image of Abrego's knuckles with tattoos of a weed leaf, a smiley face, a cross, and a skull, with Photoshopped numbers underneath spelling MS-13. Now, people started pointing out that this was clearly Photoshopped, to which I say, I mean, come on. Yes, it's justification pulled out of his ass, but he's not literally claiming that the crudely photoshopped MS-13 are actually tattooed on Abrego's hands. It's clearly a chart claiming dubiously that the tattoos somehow stand for MS-13. It doesn't make sense, but at least it's not as completely stupid as claiming that the MS Paint 13 numbers are actually real. We're gonna cut to a clip of him saying that, aren't we?
He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
Oh, he had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the
do that.
letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
Yeah, that was Photoshopped. So let me
That was Photoshop, Terry. You can't do that.
Oh no! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! And he's like, wait, he's still the president. I mean, I guess technically it wasn't Photoshopped because Photoshop would look better, but woof! Woof, I say! Bad president. But hey, at least this can't get any stupider, right? Am I right? It's weird no one is confirming that I'm right.
A U.S. senator sitting down with the deported immigrant. But what are they drinking? Is it really margaritas?
No, it's not. Hope that helps. It's not. Here's the senator describing what happened.
We just had glasses of water on the table. I think maybe some coffee. And as we were talking, one of the government people came over and deposited 2 other glasses on the table with ice, and I don't know if it was salt or sugar around the top, but they look like margaritas. And let me just be very clear, neither of us touched the drinks that were in front of us. Nobody drank any margaritas or sugar water or whatever it is.
I probably would have drank the fake margaritas, if I'm being honest with myself. I mean, you put something in front of me, I'm gonna drink it, all right? You've seen the ads. Anyway, woof again, double woof. What an obvious and weird lie. Like, are we children? What is the narrative they are spinning by sticking a margarita glass in this photo op? That Abrego is like this terrorist gangbanger who was punished by our hero Trump and then sentenced to a Salvadoran sandals resort? He's having margaritas, you see, so it's fine that he's been illegally deported from his family. Because he got a margarita. And so, what, they're gonna use that one obvious photo op to claim that they are above the law? Yep, that is what they're gonna do.
We deported gang members, including the one you had a margarita with. And that guy is a human trafficker, and that guy is a gangbanger, and the evidence is going to be clear. In the days to come, you're going to see who you went to defend. No judge in the judicial branch cannot tell me or the president how to conduct foreign policy. No judge can tell me how I have to outreach to a foreign partner or what I need to say to them. And if I do reach to that foreign partner and talk to them, I have under no obligation to share that with the judiciary branch.
Man, I don't think you can just say someone is a human trafficker, at least not without credible evidence. Like, perhaps if there was video of him partying with a human trafficker at Mar-a-Lago, then maybe. Like, if you're really good friends with a human trafficker and then there's some sort of falling out with them, and your defenders claim that the falling out was because he was creepy to young girls at your club, but then you're asked about it and you say, actually, we had a falling out because he was trying to hire people for my club, and then they're like, wait, underage girls? And he's like, yeah, I guess. Then maybe. Sure, but in Kilmar's case, the accusation comes from a traffic stop where he was driving 9 other people. During that stop, the cops accused him of trafficking people and having $1,400 on him. And then let him go with a warning. You know, as you do for human traffickers. So I guess if you're a cop, you can just say someone is a human trafficker. My bad. Also, the Trump administration did, in fact, have to provide evidence that they were trying to comply with the Supreme Court order to facilitate the return of Abrego to the United States. Which brings us to another lie, which is that the Supreme Court did not order the Trump administration to get Abrego Garcia back, and that they actually sided with the Trump administration. For context, the Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration had to facilitate the return of Abrego to the United States, as stated in the Supreme Court ruling upholding the lower court order that, quote, requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. Webster's dictionary defines facilitate as to help bring something about. So what is the Trump administration's take on this very clear order? Trump's policy chief and dried dog turd Stephen Miller claimed, quote, "The ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, we could deport him a second time." So, you know, a bald-faced lie from a bald-faced man. You see how exhausting this is? Debunking one lie opens up a whole other bunch of side quest lies, like a lie fractal, and it's infuriating and designed to make us want to give up. You turn in the debunk of the lie, and then they're like, okay, but now you have to deal with this other lie, but it's on the other side of the map, and there's no fast travel, so you have to grind the materials to make the vehicle to go to the other side of the map to debunk that lie, and then you have to bring it back to the original location. Some of us have jobs. I mean, not me really, but some of us. Luckily, I drink Turbo Warmbo Grind Juice Energy Slush to start my day, which tends to last about 21 hours before I black out from chest pains. So I'm never giving up. I can sit and read and yell all day. I medically died for 3 minutes yesterday, and I was still screaming the entire time. Turbo Warmbo, on sale now at our merch store. Anyway, so you accidentally sent a guy to the very country he was seeking asylum from against a court order. Whoops-a-diddly-doopsie, but what can you doozy? That horse has left the barn, and by horse I mean human being, and by barn I mean constitutional protections. But whatever could the government of the most powerful country on earth even do? Their hands are tied! I mean, not tied in the same way they tie the hands of teenage immigrants who make a right turn on red in literal handcuffs, but you know, tied. How are they supposed to get him back all the way from El Salvador, a country we have absolutely no leverage with, other than the fact we're paying them tens of millions of dollars to rent out their people zoo for those we deem our undesirables? Attorney General Pam Bondi claimed that it's really all up to El Salvador, that there's literally nothing else they can do, saying, quote, "If they want to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane. That's up for El Salvador if they want to return him." Meanwhile, President Bukele of El Salvador claims there's nothing he can do either, saying, quote, "I don't have the power to return him to the United States." Even if we provide the plane? You're sitting right next to each other, guys. Figure it out. But sadly, no. The poor, powerless president of a country has his hands tied too. Not like they tied the hands of human rights attorney Ruth Eleonora Lopez when they arrested her and handcuffed her, but you know, hands are tied. So, geez, I guess, no one had the authority to bring him back, like he's in the Phantom Zone. Again, they think we're children here. Imagine if what they were saying was true, that a person can be put in this legislative Schrodinger's cat. It would be scandalous news. Meanwhile, Trump, a stupid guy, just came right out and knocked over all the cards, outright saying he could, in fact, get Abrego back. He just doesn't want to.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has
he's
ordered
not.
you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision.
It's so funny how there's that Aaron Sorkin view of politics and justice, where the bad guy is tricked into confessing and is therefore found guilty and punished. Yet, you got the first part of that right, but somehow not the second. I think Trump clearly resented having to ever lie about lacking the power to do something. He'll lie about pretty much everything. He loves lying. He's got a lies kink. But if the lie is about him being weak against some other country, well, can't have that. So yeah, they eventually brought him back to the United States easily, by the way. They brought him back, albeit to keep fucking him around, easily. They always could. They just didn't want to. And lied. Like, they objectively lied about this. There's no spin you can put on it. They accidentally deported him. Then they said they couldn't bring him back. Then Trump said he could easily bring him back. And then they brought him back. It's not just lies, but lazy lies. Stuff that we used to care about, but we all know it doesn't matter anymore. Which is kind of the point of this entire video. They can just lie. Routinely, in visual form, like some kind of propaganda.
Behind us in the wider shot, the north lawn is dotted with 100 yard signs that show illegal immigrant mugshots next to the heinous crime that they have been accused of.
Yeah, those aren't mugshots. They called them mugshots. The media keeps calling them mugshots. Even lefty-ass MSNBC calls them mugshots. But if you actually look at the posters, most of them weren't mugshots. They were an assortment of different random photos of the accused, most either outside or in their cars, with their alleged crime written under the photo. A mugshot would show they're actually being booked and given due process, which isn't actually happening. They weren't convicted of crimes. This is Nazi-level posting the crimes of Jews style fascist propaganda. I'm not being an alarmist when I say that their lies are becoming disturbingly authoritarian. This administration is out there blatantly lying about what habeas corpus is.
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right
let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President
Habeas
Lincoln
corpus,
used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason.
I support habeas corpus. I also recognize that the President of the United States has the authority under the Constitution to decide if it should be suspended or not.
Not a great sign when they start changing blatantly the meanings of the most fundamental legal definitions, and then, when corrected, start talking about how they can totally suspend our rights either way. Also a bad sign when, in addition to lying about what it is, she clearly also doesn't know what it is. This is all particularly bad when the Trump administration is lying at a breakneck pace when it comes to most of their legal arguments. For instance, the Trump administration deported a number of Venezuelan immigrants to El Salvador's CICOT by claiming they were Tren de Aragua gang members and skipping legal processes by invoking the Alien Enemies Act. You see, by saying these immigrants constituted an invasion by Venezuela, they were able to bypass any pesky sorts of due process procedures or court cases. A federal judge determined this was an illegal misuse of the Alien Enemies Act since, we're not at war with Venezuela. It's not an invasion. That's not words what they do. But instead of following that order, the Trump administration deported them anyway. Their lie was that the judge had no right to stop them because the alleged gang members are terrorists who have invaded the United States at the behest of the Venezuelan government. Basically, they are claiming that we're in a secret war with Venezuela, so they don't need to listen to judges or adhere to due process to, make sure that people they pick up off the street are actually these Tren de Aragua gang members, and even if they are, whether it's legal to traffic them to a different country's prison. Trump is claiming that he has the sole authority to determine whether we're being invaded, the government releasing a statement saying, quote, "The determination of whether there has been an invasion or predatory incursion, whether an organization is sufficiently linked to a foreign nation or government, or whether national security interests have otherwise been engaged so as to implicate the AEA, is fundamentally a political question to be answered by the president." So first of all, oh no, but what if the president's an evil pedophile and idiot? Basically, if Trump says another country is invading us, it's true, even when the claims he makes have no evidence or are blatantly false. And the claim is false. Trump's only proof is that the former vice president of Venezuela, Tarek El-Aissami, was governor of the Aragua region from 2012 to 2017, during which time the Tren de Aragua gang grew. But you might notice the word former there. Aissami is no longer the vice president, as he was ousted by the government in 2023, arrested in 2024, and Venezuela President Maduro has publicly claimed that the Tren de Aragua gang are his political enemies. It's such a pile of lies. Like, even if he was currently the vice president, That still doesn't link him to Tren de Aragua. We super duper pooper can't allow any president to simply decide that another country is invading us and subsequently declare anyone, even criminals, from that country as terrorists. That isn't even a slippery slope. It's not even a free fall. It's us being pulled down into fascism. Like how the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror actually goes faster than a free fall due to their cable system. It's like that, but Nazis. The Tower of Fuhrer. I don't know why I'm talking about Disney rides. This is pretty serious. I think it's probably an emotional defense mechanism. And speaking of that, we should take a break for ads. Somehow, we've only just begun. Somehow, this is going to get worse. Like how the ghost follows you home at the end of the Haunted Mansion. Ads. Hi, news gobblers! Can I call you a news gobbler? You can't talk back, so it's sticking. It can be really tough to get all the facts these days, what with all the sludge and what have you. And that's why I use Ground News, a website and app we reached out to, which you can access via the QR code on the screen. I've been working with Ground News for a long time, and that's for a reason. I think they're one of the most powerful solutions for breaking down the news and the various slants by which it is presented. For example, I recently saw that Washington Post fact checker Glenn Kessler, the Pinocchio's guy, took a buyout and will be leaving the newspaper. This was mostly reported by right-leaning outlets who are positively giddy that rampant lies will now go un-Pinocchio'd. The Federalist, while spelling Kessler's name wrong in their article, celebrated his departure and said he leaves behind more fiction than fact. Their evidence? That Kessler talked about how Russia attempted to influence the 2016 election and that the Trump administration attempted to collude with them, something that did, based on facts and stuff, happen. That rage-inducing diversion was super easy to find with Ground News. At ground.news/SMN, you will get 40% off unlimited access, which gets you all the top headlines, plus extra features like a factuality chart and analysis of the news bias of each source. That's ground.news/SMN for 40% off. The link is in the description. The Pinocchios have escaped! Where'd they go? Their extended noses, they could be used as weapons if you don't track them down soon. Pinocchios! Pinocchios! Is this haunted room actually getting more fascist? Hi, welcome back. We're talking about lies. All of them. Well, not all of them. The ones from the Trump administration, from ICE, about ICE, not water that's been frozen into a solid state. I feel like we don't need to make that clear. So, sometimes the Trump administration doesn't just lie to justify their defiance of judges, but lie directly to judges in order to enact their cruel agenda. There's, of course, the routine withholding of information from attorneys and judges, such as the locations of the planes full of human people. Do you remember that? They refused to tell U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy where the planes full of immigrants were being sent, as it could be anywhere from South Sudan to Rwanda. The lawyer for the Trump administration, when asked by a judge where the the planes were, claimed the information was classified, but failed to provide any justification or authority for declaring that information classified. Again, slippery slope stuff trying to tie wartime or military language to immigration policy. But sometimes the lies are such absolute blatant hogwater that they're a direct insult to the intelligence of judges. For instance, a gay man known only as OCG sought asylum in the United States after being persecuted for his sexual orientation in Guatemala and after being raped and held for ransom in Mexico. He has no criminal history, and it is completely legal to seek asylum. During his immigration hearings, OCG told a judge of his fears of being deported to Mexico, which again is not his home country, as he was sexually assaulted and kidnapped there. So, an immigration judge issued a withholding of removal due to the danger of torture and persecution he faced in Guatemala. But what does the Trump administration do? They traffic him to Mexico, a place where he was kidnapped and raped, and act like that country wouldn't just send him immediately back to Guatemala, which they did. To justify this absolutely ghoulish act, DHS lied to the judge and claimed that OCG said right before removal, that he had no fear of being sent to Mexico. You know, the country where he was kidnapped and raped. When the judge demanded evidence of this claim, oopsie doopsie, they couldn't find a single witness or official to support the claim. They lied to a judge about a man in their custody, saying he was fine with being sent to a country that he had expressly said in court he was afraid to go back to due to being kidnapped and raped. Maybe they cited the case of Squidward v. Opposite Day or something. Fortunately, he has been returned to the United States after a judge ordered it. Anyway, keep this in mind as we explore other claims that DHS, ICE, and police make about the immigrants held in their custody without lawyers or other witnesses. Because, and this is important, these routine lies aren't just being made at the higher levels, but the boots on the ground enforcement of the ICE regime. And oddly enough, they are often these really weird and lazy lies where they say the immigrant, wanted to be punished. For example, the bizarre, repeated lie that US citizens occasionally wander up to ICE agents and lie that they aren't legal citizens. For fun? No, really. ICE has, on at least 2 occasions, justified the arrest of United States citizens by claiming they told officers they're here illegally. For example, Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez, who was pulled over for speeding. Gomez was born in Georgia, the state, and is an American citizen. But he's not fluent in English nor in Spanish, given that he speaks an indigenous language. So he was arrested and held in prison for 48 hours until his birth certificate was verified. How did ICE justify this?
Senior DHS official said in a statement to NewsHour that after a stop by a Florida Highway Patrol trooper, a dual citizen of Mexico and the U.S. was detained after he said that he was in the U.S. illegally. Immediately after learning the individual was a United States citizen, he was released. Now, my producer Shrey Poppet and I spoke to Juan and his mother, and Juan disputes Homeland Security's claim, and he said that he told Highway Patrol that he was a United States citizen and shared his story with us.
As soon as I arrived at the detention center, they asked me if I am a U.S. citizen. Why do I not speak English? They were just laughing in my face.
Right. Why would he say that? Why would anyone ever say that? For the memes? If you think, so innocently, that maybe this was just a miscommunication, weirdly, it's happened more than once. Jose Hermosillo, a 19-year-old United States citizen, was thrown into ICE detention for 10 days. Why? Well, according to Homeland Security, Jose Hermosillo approached Border Patrol in Tucson, Arizona, stating he had illegally entered the United States and identified himself as a Mexican citizen. And because this is an X post, there are a bunch of replies from stupid babies saying he must have been a leftist plant because, why would anyone do such a thing? They must have been trying to make ICE look bad, a thing they couldn't possibly do on their own, or maybe ICE is bad. For the record, Hermosillo says that Border Patrol's account is absolutely not what happened. According to him, he was visiting his girlfriend's family in Arizona from New Mexico, and he had a seizure. He went to a hospital and was released without knowing how to get back to his girlfriend's family. So he approached a Border Patrol officer because he needed help. He was looking for help getting to his girlfriend's family where he was staying. Quote, I saw a car and I asked him for help, Hermosillo said. But instead of getting help, he got the opposite. The officer accused Hermosillo of being from Mexico, then called him a liar when Hermosillo said he wasn't. The cop said, quote, don't make me out like I'm stupid, then arrested him, stupidly. Like a cop in Arizona who's never heard of New Mexico. Then Hermosillo was ordered to sign a false transcript, which he couldn't read due to a learning disability. I don't know, man. What do you think is more likely? A Latino man went to an officer for help and was accused of being illegal and arrested by an organization being rewarded for making arrests? Or a Latino man went to an officer, lied about being a Mexican citizen, proclaimed he was in the United States illegally as part of a conspiracy to make them look bad. Because it definitely worked, right? And ICE has been abolished or investigated for this? Here in America, we definitely reform the police based on one bad incident, right? Because it's not like the police to be bad at their job. But wait, there's more. Sometimes ICE just claims their arrests of United States citizens didn't happen, even when there's evidence that they did, such as with Julio Noriega, a United States citizen who was rounded up by ICE officers in Chicago, thrown in a van, not allowed to show his identification, and held for over 10 hours. ICE never documented his arrest, which is terrifying. But maybe this person is also a lefty plant. Who knows? And there's still more. ICE also lies that they don't make arrests in hospitals or schools, which they do, such as Aditya Harsono, a man arrested at a hospital whose case we'll come back to because it's just extremely messed up. Now, to be fair and to be balanced, this is technically not a lie anymore because ICE removed their policy against raiding hospitals and schools. So they don't. And of course, it's not so much that they do not raid schools. It's that they have tried and failed to raid schools. United States federal agents attempted to hunt down undocumented children by entering 2 LA elementary schools and were barred from entry by staff. At the time, they claimed they had permission from the kids' parents, which was yet another lie. And luckily for these kids, the LA school district superintendent took this shit personally.
I would be the biggest hypocrite in the world, regardless of my position today, if today I did not fight for those who find themselves in the same predicament I faced over 40 years ago when I arrived in this country at the age of 17 as an undocumented immigrant. Education made me and saved me. I became a teacher, a principal, a superintendent leading the nation's largest districts, 4 times selected as National Superintendent of the Year. Do not underestimate the power of the immigrant child who may very well become an adult who does well and good by America.
Boom! How do you like them steamed hams? Remember steamed hams? Anyway, a good point from this nerd about the basic foundation of America and the American dream. A thing I thought everyone knew already. Just kidding, everyone obviously does not know that. But now, according to the DHS website, these children trying to get educated are criminals. Quote, criminals will no longer be able to hide in America's schools and churches to avoid arrest. The Trump administration will not tie the hands of our brave law enforcement and instead trust them to use common sense. Think about it. Who else could they be referring to but children? Do schools famously let random non-children hide out in them? Do you think a guy like me could walk up to a school and be like, hey, let me in, I need a place to lay low? They're talking about kids here. But I guess since they're undocumented, allegedly, that now makes them suddenly not deserving of our compassion. But at least we don't deport US citizen children, and certainly not ones with cancer. Of course, the Trump administration promises they simply do not deport US citizens, except we have and we do. Between 2015 and 2020, there were at least 70 citizens deported from the United States. The Washington Post was able to track dozens just from the second Trump era alone. It's like 7 months, you guys. When they asked for data on these deportations, the DHS spokesperson replied, "We don't have data to provide you on the deportation of US citizens because we don't deport US citizens." But they do. And we know they do because they've admitted to it. In the cases of the US citizen children who have been deported, including a child with cancer, the DHS released a statement that it's totally cool to deport these US citizen children because, quote, rather than separate their families, ICE asked the mothers if they wanted to be removed with their children or if they wanted ICE to place the children with someone safe the parent designates. So there you go. They deport US citizens, the thing they said they didn't do. But it's all okay because the mothers agreed to it, right? Well, about that, that's probably another little fib. Just a little guy, just a little fiblet. I mean, think about this. The mothers, with their children, were held incommunicado. No ability to talk to their loved ones or a lawyer, despite many attempts by their families, including U.S. citizen relatives, to contact them. Attorneys for the families also tried to get in touch with ICE and were ignored. There was one case in which a mother was able to speak to her husband for less than a minute, but the phone was cut off before he could share the attorney's phone number with her. So if you believe ICE's story here, imagine being in that kind of situation where you are prevented from talking to anyone from the outside world. You have been detained with your child, likely through some kind of sudden and aggressive and dishonest tactic. And then these agents are like, hey, don't worry, give your kid to us. We'll totally get them to your family. Would you believe them? Would you hand your kid over to a stranger? Also, ICE probably is lying about doing this at all, because many of these immigrant families directly contradict ICE's claims, saying they were not, in fact, given the option to give their children to family members. The father of one deported 2-year-old citizen said, "They simply deported us." I mean, look, you can try to convince yourself that all immigrants are liars, I guess, or you can take a moment to think about any interaction you've had with a cop, any detective show where the police character deceives a suspect. I don't know why we suddenly pretend like ICE doesn't act like every other type of cop. They are liars. They love it. Have you never seen a news story like this before?
After registering in the lobby, this guy thought he was going into another room for a free DVD player.
Come on in, man. Congratulations.
But Chandler police had a different prize for him and 24 others who have outstanding arrest warrants, mostly for DUIs.
Man, bummer for him, to live in a time when a DVD player was exciting. Anyway, yeah, cops lie. They enjoy it. They think it's a fun thing they do. They love telling us about their fun lies. And just as much as cops love lying to us, ICE loves lying to immigrants. But their lies are way worse than promising a shitty DVD player. Their lies are actually punching holes in the foundation of society. Their lies hurt everyone, non-immigrants and bigots included. We'll get to that, but first, let's look at some of these lies. And note that for most of these cases, these are immigrants or travelers who tried to exist through legal channels, either with student visas, seeking asylum, or simply being tourists with the proper visas. These aren't people with DUIs trying to win an awful, depressing DVD player. So, remember I mentioned Aditya Harsono earlier, the guy who was arrested at a hospital? Somehow, it's more messed up than that. For starters, Harsono was a legal immigrant from Indonesia who had his visa secretly revoked. As in, no one told him. As far as he knew, he had a legal F1 student visa and was enjoying life in Minnesota, as much as you can enjoy life in Minnesota. I'm so sorry, everybody, I didn't mean it. With his wife and a newborn with special needs. He was working as a supply chain manager in a hospital and was in the process of applying for a green card, as he is married to a US citizen. Then, the hospital he worked at called him into a meeting in the basement. He went to the meeting because it's work, and you have to. And there was ICE, like the fucking kid catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Like most of us, Harsono was not expecting his own employers to trap him and went to the basement to be ambushed and kidnapped. He was subsequently fired as well to add insult to injury, meaning his wife is now caring for their newborn with no income and no health insurance because we live in a pitiless hellscape of stupid terrors. By the way, the day after his arrest, his F1 visa was still active. I should make that clear. It was revoked later. The government claiming retroactively that he'd overstayed. They actually backdated the rescission after the fact, like liars. Also, if you're wondering, this entire arrest was due to a 2022 conviction of the very dangerous crime of graffiti on a semi-truck trailer, a misdemeanor he already paid a $100 fine for. You know, really dangerous criminal stuff. Perhaps more relevant is that Harsono is a Muslim who has posted on social media in support of humanitarian aid for Gaza and has attended a George Floyd protest where he was arrested but charges were dismissed. Oh, yeah, probably should have led with that detail. Cool country. Where can I sign up for the country? But it's not just making your place of work betray you. One of ICE's favorite deceptions is luring people to their immigration appointments and then detaining them. You know, for the crime of, I guess, following the legal process and being trusting. That'll show them. This was the case for Rosemary Alvarado. Her husband is already a naturalized citizen, and she was applying for a green card in Kansas. She was summoned for a spousal interview and dutifully showed up to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services office in Kansas City. Again, what other option does she have? At the meeting, she was told, quote, "Everything's looking good. You guys have all the information we needed." Then, less than a minute later, ICE entered the building and arrested her. To quote Rosemary's daughter, "They made us believe that she was approved, that her petition was approved, and that she was going to get her green card, but that was never going to happen." Why? What crime did Rosemary commit to deserve this? Apparently, in 2000, the year, there was a single court appointment Rosemary had missed when she was literally a child. She otherwise dutifully followed the process. That was enough to get her arrested 25 years later, as she was applying for legal status. She's there. She's doing it the right way. But as I hope people are figuring out, there is no right way anymore. There are, of course, more examples we could cite. So let's do that. There's the Trejo Lopez family, who had been responsibly going through the legal process to apply for asylum since 2016. The brothers, 19 and 20, showed up to their ICE appointment as they've been pursuing green cards for special immigrant juvenile status. The family's asylum request, after fleeing gangs in El Salvador, had been denied, but they were appealing it in court, something they're entitled to do. The case was ongoing, but for some fickle reason, probably to juice the stats, they were nabbed for deportation, despite the fact they have no criminal record or even school disciplinary record. According to their attorney, it really depends on when you check in. Who's the supervisor of the day? You may be picked up, you may not be. You may be given an ankle bracelet. In other words, if they feel like it, they could ruin your entire life depending on the day. And I can't stress enough, these are people going through the legal process, actively going through it. Really think about that and how it pulverizes the argument that immigrants just have to do things legally. This argument.
I'm fine with legal immigration. I like it. We need people, and I'm absolutely fine with it. We want to have it.
F that stupid pedophile all the way to hell. Sorry, that's another topic. But regarding this topic, you can't say that you love legal immigration, or rather, you can't get away with saying that you love legal immigration when you're also ordering ICE to kidnap and detain people going through the legal process. Sorry, you don't get to say that. You don't get to pretend like you believe that. It's wild that any American lets the GOP get away with this, or doesn't see how blatantly insidious and infuriating these stories are. Like, we've all dealt with the government. We've all been to the dang DMV. We have fictional stories specifically about dystopian bureaucracy. And this is straight out of something like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Brazil. It's the 90s caricature of the DMV, but if you make the slightest error in some form, you could possibly be put in chains, kidnapped from your family, and tossed in some crowded, unhygienic detention center for an indeterminable amount of time by people who are specifically making it this way to hit an arbitrary quota. Literally Brazil, guys. Literally that scene where the totalitarian police kidnapped Archibald Buttle instead of Archibald Tuttle. Dystopian filing errors. This isn't a hypothetical or a movie or a book or a movie based on a book. It's happening. such as the case of the Danish legal immigrant, husband to a U.S. citizen and father of 4, who was imprisoned following a citizenship appointment. I want to reiterate that. A citizenship appointment. Not a green card appointment, not an asylum appointment, that's bad enough, but a citizenship appointment. The kind of step in immigration bureaucracy you only reach after jumping through many, many hoops, being in the country for years and years, and committing no crimes. Casper Jule Eriksson thought the appointment would be a normal interview that is conducted in the final stages of the citizenship process. Because many are, and all should be. Instead, he got thrown into detention. What kind of horrific crime did he commit to merit this treatment after spending 16 years in the US as a legal resident and going through all the hoops? A paperwork error from 2015. Yes, that's right. An error that nobody noticed for a decade can now mean you are summarily thrown in detention for 2 months and counting. His wife is pregnant, by the way. Not exactly the hardened criminals that the Trump administration promised they'd be going after, huh? Depressingly, Eriksson is a Trump supporter who blames Biden for not keeping an eye on his paperwork. He doesn't deserve this, of course, obviously. But I just wanted to, depress you all a little more, I guess. The point is, if you make a genuine mistake on one of countless forms that apparently justifies you getting thrown in some detention center to rot for a bit, while ICE can just lie to retroactively cover their ass. Brazil. It's literally the film Brazil. One of the least fun dystopian fictions we could have chosen. We had so many options. Escape from New York, The Giver, Equilibrium had gun kata. We could have had gun kata. I mean, let's not go overboard. Anyway, you get it. They're liars, and they're infuriating. We mentioned this in a previous episode, but ICE literally wrote the handbook on lying. I mean, actually, literally. As in, they typed up a handbook about lying and how their officers should do it. ICE lies so routinely, there's an entire warning section on the Immigrant Defense Project website about how ICE actively deceives immigrants as well as citizens. Apparently, ICE uses what they call ruses, a cute little term that they landed on for lying to people in order to make arrests. This isn't new, it has been going on for decades. One such documented ruse was them pretending to want to speak about the Bible to get the targets to open their door. Another is to pretend to be local law enforcement rather than ICE. Just a random thought here, but there's a war crime called perfidy, where it is against international law for soldiers to mimic the Red Cross or to pretend to be civilians. The reason it's such a serious crime is that it blurs the rules of war, endangering groups like the Red Cross or making civilians potential targets. After all, if the police can pretend to be anyone, it makes anyone potentially police. It's like how we're hearing stories of people pretending to be ICE because they've proudly made themselves indistinguishable from masked kidnappers. See, because when you betray basic trust, well, you betray the basic rules of our society. Interesting thought. And it's a thought we will continue after our next and final and best and worst and final ad break. Be right back. Try not to get kidnapped by the government while I'm gone.
It's time for cinema, the summer of. We're technically only halfway through summer calendar-wise, but if you're a kid who has to go back to school, oof. Sorry, your summer's basically donezo. Let's face it, in a few weeks, you're going to be spending most of your free time having ChatGPT do your math homework poorly. Better cram in all those summer action movies on Pluto TV while you still can. Movies like Gladiator, Beverly Hills Cop, Stealth, I Will Hunt You for Sport, Chapstick the Movie, Four Brothers, Battlefield Smurf, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Travis Kelce's Grammar starring Kelsey Grammer, Radiator Springs Racers, the real race that the ride based on the movie Cars was based on, Star Trek, R.L. Stein's The Floofenings, Muppets with Knives, Drop Dud Fud, and Good Burger. Bring the action with you and stream for free on all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
Did you get kidnapped? Did you get kidnapped by our $28 billion masked immigration police force? That seems normal, right? For ICE to have a larger annual budget than the FBI, U.S. Marshals Service, and Bureau of Prisons combined, despite undocumented immigrants having a significantly lower crime rate? Does that seem normal? Or perhaps like a fascist kind of dilly? Anyway, before the break, we were talking about all the ways ICE lies to and tricks people in order to arrest them. Ruses, as they call it. ICE refers to this in their Fugitive Operations Handbook, saying, a ruse is a tactic designed to control the time and location of a law enforcement encounter. The result is improved safety for the officers and the public by reducing the opportunity for the target to flee. And more recently, senior U.S. immigration officials have ordered ICE to, quote, turn the creative knob up to 11 when arresting people, to push the envelope. We love Spinal Tap references in our Gestapo literature, don't we? Spineless crap, more like it. Got 'em. They literally told ICE officers that, quote, if it involves handcuffs on wrists, it's probably worth pursuing. They're already lying and also breaking into homes without warrants, so I'm a little concerned about their idea of creativity. But we do already have an idea of what this looks like, such as the recent case of ICE impersonating electrical workers in Tucson, Arizona. You know, the place where that cop hadn't heard of New Mexico. ICE in Tucson tricked a woman into letting them inside. She only realized what was up when she spotted a badge hiding under the shirt of one of the men. And here is where we talk about the consequences of all of this. Because that story alone is disastrous for multiple reasons. For one, what does that mean for people who are electrical workers? Do they like this? Do they like that people are going to think they might be the cops? And perhaps people might react in a negative way when they are just trying to read a meter? Remember that thing I said about perfidy, that war crime? When ICE pretends to be civilians in their arrests, they confuse and distort the social fabric. When they go around in unmarked cars and civilian clothes, they create chaos, supervillain levels of chaos. Like, there are classic movie villains whose goal is to sow paranoia in the public with similar tactics, right? To make us all distrust each other. There's a reason we regard that as a threat in films. There's a reason I regard it as a threat that a movie from just 17 years ago is now considered a classic film. But whatever. That's my cross to bear. My point is, everything ICE and Trump are doing, from the local to the legal level, seems to be designed to erode basic trust in society. Uniquely so. Some might try to argue that this is nothing new, that the mass deportations ICE is doing are par for the course. And while the US immigration system has always been somewhat draconian, it has been escalated to an incredible degree. It's true that since Clinton, presidents have deported millions of immigrants over their terms. Under Clinton, about 12 million people were deported. Under Bush, about 10 million. Under Obama, about 5 million people were deported. Except most of those cases were returns, as in people caught specifically at the border, as opposed to people living for years in the United States. They weren't snatched off the street like a scene in V for Vendetta, another of those classic films from like 19 years ago. Also, Trump wants to deport 20 million undocumented immigrants, despite the current estimates for undocumented people residing in the United States being only around 11 million. This has to mean going after people who aren't criminals or undocumented immigrants. We've already shown you examples of that. In 2009, an estimated 51% of people deported had been convicted of serious crimes. This percentage rose to 90% of deportations in 2016, and Biden continued Trump's policy of Title 42 expulsions during his presidency, basically using the COVID pandemic as an excuse to turn people away at the border. While there is plenty to criticize about the ICE apparatus under other presidencies, Democrats included, whatever restraints had been in place before have been removed. removed. Whatever focus on criminal immigrants has been eschewed in favor of deporting anyone as fast as possible with as little process as possible. Process that everyone, perhaps, is due. In his first days in office in this new term, Trump rescinded a Biden memorandum that made public safety threats a priority for DHS deportations. Instead, he's focusing on softer targets like unaccompanied minor children to really juice those stats. And to make kids an even easier target, the Trump administration has cut off funding for a program that provided these children legal assistance. Really can't stress enough that this isn't about crime, as Trump's original racist Goldin escalator appearance implied. This is an effort to get rid of anyone who wants to come into the country. This is a white nationalist effort. Why else is he also trying to cut off anyone seeking asylum in the United States, as well as revoking temporary protected status for people, which is far from the "we're going after tough criminals" claim. Tough criminals, apparently, like a mother and her 3 children who had an asylum case that was pending, who were only released by ICE after public outcry from their neighborhood. Because if this was about crime, it should be noted that what they are doing actually makes communities less safe. It's actually really obvious when you think about it. For starters, focusing on law-abiding people rather than those convicted of crimes means there are fewer resources to go after people convicted of crimes. This is backed up by data. The woke Cato Institute found that Trump's first-term strategy of focusing on asylum seekers actually led to greater attempts by convicts to cross the border. They concluded Trump's actions not only led to a 3-fold increase in criminal crossings from his first month to his last month in office, but they also reversed a decade of near-continuous progress in deterring criminals from attempting to enter the United States illegally. In fact, during Trump's first term and under his direction, ICE actually released more immigrants with criminal convictions than Biden did. Again, from the Cato Institute. In 2019, Trump's ICE released more than twice the number of individuals convicted of crimes compared to any year during Biden's presidency. Since Biden prioritized the removal of criminals, his administration has released a lower percentage of criminals than Trump did. Under Trump in 2019, ICE was using 68% of its detention space for people without any criminal convictions. And you can be sure that with the new scramble to make absurd quotas of 83,000 deportations every month and arresting 3,000 people a day, that percentage is only going to increase. There have only been an estimated 425,000 non-citizens with criminal convictions that aren't already in federal custody over the last 40 years. So again, to make that 20 million quota, he has to go after everyone and more. He's gonna have to invent cloning or something. That's why a quota is stupid and bad. That's not how crime works, and they know it, which is why they are going after the low-hanging fruit first. In this case, people who are openly going through the legal process legally. But just think about what that means. If ICE is prioritizing the people who are law-abiding, who does that leave? If you know that willingly going to an immigration office might put you in jail, that you're going to be punished for working with the system, what's the alternative? If you and your family are fleeing violence or poverty and need to be here, where do you go? You go to the criminals, don't you? This is a well-documented effect. When you force people out of the legal labor market, they resort to illegal ways to make money. People need to make a living somehow, and when you remove all legal means to do so, they are forced into illegal sectors like the drug trade. This is intuitive for anything else. When we banned alcohol, did people stop drinking? Gun enthusiasts love to point this out, right? There are so many intuitive examples. If you were raised by strict parents, you know exactly what the consequences are here. ICE is turning otherwise law-abiding people into criminals. This also means that by terrorizing immigrants, you actually make it harder for them to leave the country. More flexible borders allow immigrants to move back and forth. When you make the border a terrifying and potentially dangerous experience and make it impossible to re-enter, people will avoid it. That means that many undocumented and documented immigrants may instead stay in the United States, forced into the shadows. And of course, when law enforcement starts working with ICE, immigrants will be too frightened to interact with them as well. That means they are less likely to report a crime or seek help if they're being victimized, or if they witness someone else being victimized. This is what happens when you erode the trust we have in our government, right? Why would the neighbor of a domestic abuse victim ever speak up if their reward is to be rounded up and detained? By the way, this is exactly why we have sanctuary cities. That's the entire point behind them. And yet, there's this idea on the right that sanctuary cities, where law enforcement are limited in how they can rat people out to ICE, are these lawless, terrifying zones of chaos. Except the opposite is true. The research indicates that sanctuary cities improve communication between locals and their police departments. Meanwhile, deportations do not decrease local crime rates. In fact, there was a program started by Bush that was ironically named Secure Communities. Through that program, local police departments worked with ICE to detect undocumented people. It was then shut down by Obama, probably because the data found that it resulted in an increase in crimes against the locals by 1.3 million cases, while reporting decreased. Sanctuary counties, meanwhile, did the opposite. Per every 10,000 people, there are around 35 fewer crimes committed. So, no, it's not about crime. They don't care about crime. I feel like we've made it very clear through examples and logic and data how the current administration absolutely doesn't care about crime. Also throw the word Epstein in there. You'll see why. Listen, if you were maybe an adult baby with a dog's brain and none of their good qualities, then perhaps you could point to individual cases of immigrants committing crime. Because everyone does crimes, but as we keep saying, undocumented immigrants actually commit crimes at lower rates than the native-born population. But again, sure, people do crimes, terrible crimes, like what happened with Laken Riley, a young woman who was murdered by an undocumented immigrant from Venezuela. Her case was used as the inspiration for the Laken Riley Act, directing ICE to deport anyone simply charged, not convicted, of any crime, including shoplifting, as they claim that her murder could have been prevented if the murderer would have been stopped if he had been deported for shoplifting. But sure, a lot of murderers would have been stopped if we deported them for shoplifting in the time cop sense of things. Not just immigrants. Charlie Manson skipped school a lot as a kid. Should we write a law called the Sharon Tate Act, where we deport any white kid who skips class? What are we doing exactly? Even former ICE agents think this bill would make it harder to actually go after dangerous people. Jason Hauser, chief of staff for ICE from 2021 to 2023, said, "This bill hinders the work ICE does day to day. If passed, you will see less individuals in detention who are violent convicted criminals than you see today. Fewer, not less." But good point from Hauser. Luckily, we had dozens of Democratic lawmakers bend over and support the bill, rewarding Trump for a policy victory just months after he killed a bipartisan border bill when he wasn't even the president, and just in time for him to become president and sign it into law a week after being inaugurated. Yay! Resistance. Again, it's not just that it's cruel and stupid to make laws like this, but it also stretches law enforcement thin. Believe it or not, but there are cops who probably don't want to throw every shoplifter in jail, if only because they don't want the extra work. They'd rather do the stuff that matters to them, like trampling protesters with horses, or joining a white supremacy gang, or, as we mentioned earlier, doing domestic violence. Also, if we're gonna create policy by cherry-picking single events, why not do it the other way? With examples that actually align with the statistics. What about the case in Tucson, Arizona? Tucson, Arizona, where an undocumented man stopped a man from stealing a car with children inside, physically restraining him until police arrived. The suspect was successfully arrested and charged with attempted theft and kidnapping. The undocumented immigrant could, for all we know, have saved those kids' lives. And we don't even get to know his name because that would make him a target for deportation. What of that man? Should that man have to be afraid that the cops will also arrest him? There are also many cases where undocumented women who are victims of violent assault or domestic violence may be encouraged to report crimes against their abusers who may do other crimes. This used to be the case in Laredo, Texas, where Sister Rosemary Welsh runs a women's shelter in which undocumented women used to feel safe reporting crimes to local law enforcement. This means men who committed violent crimes against women were more likely to be reported. Who knows how many potential victims these women saved? This is why trust and a strong social fabric is important. It protects everyone, not just undocumented immigrants. Again, we're talking about the foundation of a society, the trust in the basic system, like the stuff we teach children, where if you see a bad thing happening, you go tell a helper. But what happens when the helpers might arrest you? Right now, ICE is camping outside of immigrant courts to arrest immigrants who dutifully show up to their hearings. They've been, big quotes, dismissing the cases of immigrants when they show up to the courtroom and then ambushing them outside. Because their cases have been dismissed, ICE doesn't have to wait for any pesky court case or lawyer arguments that might actually cause a judge to order a withholding of removal. Instead, ICE has been directed by the DHS to immediately deport anyone whose case has been dropped by them. Oh, and if the judges don't go along with this, they apparently get fired. Here's what that all looks like. An entire family with children shows up to their immigration hearing, gets their cases dismissed, and ends up being led out in zip ties with one of their kids, a boy, also being zip tied in front of their young daughter. Now tell me, is that the intended use of our justice system? Do you think those judges feel useful or like they are doing their intended job? Should our courtrooms be used to trick and trap immigrants who are there specifically to work through the system, where we pull this weird scam on them in order to detain them? If you were an immigrant, would you ever go back to a courtroom again after this, even if you were the witness of a crime? Would you? You know that stereotype of the shifty dude who has priors and can't get involved with the law even when they aren't implicated in a crime? This turns every immigrant into that, doesn't it? This is what we mean in that these lies completely undercut everything this country was founded on. By targeting courthouses, they have essentially nullified the entire rule of law, not just for some, but for everyone. Well, except for criminals. Not only does this help criminals by overtaxing law enforcement, but criminals can also use the ICE system to intimidate witnesses. That was the case when a Milwaukee man wrote a fake assassination threat towards Trump to frame an undocumented immigrant who was going to testify against him for his armed robbery. Luckily, the cops figured it out, or rather, the suspect confessed to the fake letters. Also, the letters were in English, even though this immigrant spoke and wrote in Spanish, but not before Kristi Noem and Fox News swooned about how they nabbed an illegal alien who threatened to assassinate President Trump. I'm sure they will issue a prompt retraction. So, what happened to this undocumented immigrant who was framed?
An undocumented immigrant is facing deportation after being arrested for a crime that prosecutors now say he did not commit.
Yeah, of course. Luckily, he's been released on bond, but now has to fight his own deportation in court. Really think about all that. This man, a father of 3, was a victim of a crime. He was then framed, very obviously, and thrown into ICE custody for months for being the victim of a crime and being willing to testify about that. And now he is probably getting deported. The actual criminal here has successfully gotten his revenge on this man by simply using our law enforcement system like henchmen, getting the fucking Department of Homeland Security to back him up. It's Gotham when Bane took over, right? Our entire court system has betrayed us. We have police walking around in disguise, lying to people to get them to show up to work or to court or to school or church, and then kidnapping them, lying to the public about who these people are, calling them criminals when they have done nothing wrong. I genuinely don't know how we're coming back from this. Once you've completely broken the social contract, once people can no longer have any trust in law enforcement, courts, or due process, it's very hard to fix. You can't just say, oops, We don't do that anymore. We're done. We're not doing that, we promise. When lying and deception become synonymous with the system, we can only conclude that we can't trust them again, if ever, without dramatic sweeping reform. And by reform, I mean complete dismantling. There's no way we can ever trust ICE again, right? Hell, I don't know why anyone would visit this country ever again. In addition to all the consequences we've talked about, when you make it okay for law enforcement and ICE to lie and cheat and do ruses for some groups of people, you open the door for them to do the same for everyone. This is not a slippery slope argument. Again, it's the Tower of Terror. When you deny due process to some people, you deny it to everyone. That is just how it works. If you can grab one person off the streets and deny them a hearing or process, that applies to everyone. Sorry, I know it's hard to give people due process, I guess.
I also think it's not practical to think that we can do due process on 8 million people. No. There's 22 million people here, and minimum illegal already just in the last 3 administrations. And there's some people that got through with Trump's administration. If we're going to give every these guys a day in court and a lawyer, we can't do it. They don't deserve it. Our system doesn't need to be double burdened.
Yeah, sorry, Fox News guy. Due process is not a privilege you earn. That makes it meaningless. Due process is the foundational cornerstone of justice. You remove that, and we don't have a justice system, only vibes. A Judge Dredd situation where someone can point at you, declare you a criminal, and you get shipped off to CCOT. And not even the good Judge Dredd, the shitty one where he takes off his mask. Oh, you think it only applies to illegals? Well, I could call ICE, tip them off that you're illegal, and with no due process, you have no way to prove you're not. And bam, off you go to El Salvador. This is the greatest lie of the Trump administration, ICE, and DHS. That we can safely deny rights to one group of people. That justice can be selective, that laws and protections can be conditional only to a specific group that we have deemed part of America. But the moment you make that decision, you are saying that human rights are negotiable, that what makes a person part of the club can change, and not just for immigrants. You are setting a precedent that you can't really undo, at least not without a war and some bunker suicides, you know? Or we cut the shit right now. We remember the thing we always knew, even if you think it's cringy or whatever, that this country is a country of immigrants. Whether your last name is Ramirez or McNews, there is no tier system here. There are no Americans who are more American than others. If you live here, you can be part of our silly, fucked up country. Congrats. Our president's a disgusting sex criminal, but not always. Sometimes, not always. Let's get you settled in. Let's give you a path to citizenship. No tricks, just America. And perhaps let's also abolish ICE. That sounds like a plan, right? We can even take those billions of dollars and do something good with them. Like make a new Blade movie. Finally, get Mahershala in there, slicing up vampires. With those billions, we could probably make like one Blade movie. Movies are very expensive. But don't worry, soon movies will be very, very cheap. Simply log on to Disney's AI Amazon extravaganza app and type in Batman fights my dad because I wanted to do my chores a little later. And then you just watch that movie. And you're like, wow, that's a piece of shit. But it was cheap, so God. That's another topic too. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. If you want to leave a comment, you can. If you don't, that's okay too. We've got Warmbo here. He is our emotional support puppet, and he is making us feel okay. He's doing okay. We got a podcast you can listen to. It's called Even More News. We have it on this channel twice a week. You can also listen to it only on podcast apps, if you prefer that. You can listen to this show, Some More News, as a podcast if you want, or you can watch it again on YouTube. Thanks. We got Patreon.com/some more news. We have a merch store that you can see here. And on merchandise are designs. Some of them involve him. Here's one of them. It's a can of this guy. Look. Look! He's asleep. Bye.